Welcome to Autism ADHD TV. It is the place to be for parents and professionals. I'm your host, Holly Blanc Moses, the mom psychologist who gets it. We dive into all kinds of important information like behavior, social skills, and learning. All right, let's get started. Welcome, Anthony Ianni, to the podcast.
Thank you, Holly. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited you're with us today. So I am going to introduce you to my audience really quick. So Anthony is one of the most sought after motivational speakers and autism advocates in the US. He has won numerous athletic awards, actually so many that we can't even list them today, including the Tim Bograkis Walk-On Award. In addition to athletic awards, Anthony received awards as an autism advocate, including being named to the CBS News national list of inspiring people on the autism spectrum. So I'm thrilled that you're here telling us about your story, and it's inspiring and it's full of motivation and really struggle. And I think people appreciate hearing these stories from the beginning of when you were on your journey to where you are now. And that has a lot to do with, unfortunately, bullying and really going at life in kind of a different way. So why don't we start at the very beginning for you? Does that work?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right.
So for me, let's rewind to 1993. That's when I was diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, or PDD-NOS for short, which is on the autism spectrum. And that was a time period, Holly, where nobody really knew what autism was. There was obviously no awareness for it, no path or guidance or even resources at that time for families and individuals who were affected by autism at that time. And the mid-90s was more of the ADD, ADHD era for diagnosis. So my diagnosis being on the spectrum was very rare during that time period. And then a year later, when I was 5 years old, a group of doctors and professionals had told my parents in an IEP meeting that because I have a type of autism, I was not going to be successful or achieve anything in my life. They told my family I would barely graduate from high school, never go to college, wouldn't be an athlete, and likely would end up in a group institution with other individuals like myself for the rest of my life. Obviously, my parents, kept their expectations high for me. They found ways to make sure that I got those accommodations and resources I needed to be successful in school. By the time I was a freshman in high school, they told me that story about what was said about me when I was 5. So that kind of became my motivation to go out and prove those people and any other doubters and naysayers and bullies that had my life wrong. I had to work very hard.
So Anthony, I'm going to stop you for a second.
Yeah, sure.
We've got a lot of professionals who also listen and watch. Mm-hmm. And thank goodness that, they're just amazing professionals. So we want to encourage them to tell their colleagues, don't ever tell parents that. Don't ever tell kids that. That's not okay. As a mom of, an autistic child, well, he's 17 now and has severe ADHD. And then our youngest has severe ADHD as well as learning differences. Don't tell anybody that because it's likely untrue. And if you set up that expectation, that child feels like they can't do anything. And we're actually setting them up for failure instead of success. So my heart just goes out to your parents because sitting in a room and hearing that must have been really difficult.
It was. And I know my mom was devastated, by their words. I know my dad was really ticked off. But, during that meeting, here's what my dad did. When the third expert was talking, he had cut the person off and had said to them, look, we appreciate what you guys do. We respect what you do in your profession. But here's what our expectations are for our son. He's going to go to high school. He's going to graduate. He's going to go to college. He's going to graduate. And he does not have to be an athlete to do all this. If the good Lord wants to bless our son with those gifts, then great, cool. But he doesn't have to be an athlete to do all these things that you say he can't do. And we're going to find a way. We're going to find a way to get this done. And if you guys aren't going to be there to help us, then we'll do this on our own. And so, but the late Dr. Sandy McDonald, Sandy at the time in the mid 90s and early 2000s, she was the assistant director for special education of Oklahoma's public schools, where I attended school. And she was in on that meeting, and she was the last person to leave the room with my parents. And she just looked them in the eyes and said, yeah, you're right. We're going to find a way to do this. We're going to find a way. We're going to do this together. And so obviously with her help, and obviously what I loved about my parents, Holly, was they didn't just make it a Greg and Jamie Ianni deal. Like, they made it an Okemos thing. They made it an administration thing. Like, my mom took a full year and a half, almost 2 years off from working because she was my advocate. She needed to be my advocate. And during that time period, like, yeah, you can get away with being, on one salary in a family. You couldn't do it now, obviously, because times have changed. But, for my mom to kind of be my advocate and kind of make sure that I was doing okay in school, it really was a big reason why we're here where we are today. And so, but their expectations for me never stayed high. And I think that's why, after they had told that story to me about when I said what was said about me when I was 5, I saw their expectations for me. And then I set the bar high for myself, which was to graduate from high school, which was to go get a Division I scholarship for basketball, preferably Michigan State, because that was my dream school. But I had to work really hard in the process. Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Like, I wasn't the smartest student that went to my high school. I wasn't. But, I had some incredible teachers who, really pushed me every day and really sacrificed a lot of things to help me get through all those tough days and tough challenges in school, to help me become the best student that I can be. And they were part of that support system, not just my family, but my teachers, my friends, my close friends, my inner circle that I still have to this day, my teammates, my coaches, like, they were all part of that. And, you fast forward, I graduated from high school in 2007, went on to Grand Valley State University for 2 years on a full scholarship for basketball. When it didn't work out for me there was only one option for me left, which was to go live my dream of playing for Coach Tom Izzo and the Michigan State Spartans, where I got to be a walk-on for 2 years, was awarded a full ride scholarship my senior year, was a part of a couple of Big Ten championship teams. I went to a Final Four. And in the process, not only did I get my bachelor's degree in sociology, but I became the NCAA's first known Division I college basketball player in history with an autism diagnosis. But a lot of that is because of my parents, because of how they pushed me every day, how they were relentless with the school system and the teachers to make sure that I got those accommodations, that my IEP plan was followed to the T. There were no shortcuts taken. And if something didn't work, they all came back together a day later, a week later, to figure out situations that would help benefit me to be successful in the classroom.
I love that you are saying that. I've got all kinds of goosebumps right now. Like, it is really such a beautiful story, because, like you said, it wasn't easy for you. You're not coming on here and saying, yeah, it was easy, it was no big deal. It was hard.
It was.
And it was a lot of work for really all of you. And like you said, having your parents support you, having this school support you, making sure the IEP is being followed. And what I love what you said as well is, when it wasn't working, coming back together soon. Sometimes what happens when patients come see me for the first time, they'll say, well, we have our IEP meeting once a year. And it's the same goals every year. And that's not okay, right?
No.
Like, that's not moving that child forward in the way that works for them. And you also mentioned, having them be on board, and also your parents feeling that they could say, hey, we need to get together soon, and not 6 months from now, but
like next week.
Like next week. Exactly. And that's not always easy for parents, because they may want that, but feel like they maybe can't ask. And it's this very, kind of hard balance between wanting to, communicate well with the school and keep everybody on the same team. Sometimes that can be tough, but like you were saying, and also those teachers who probably taught you in the way that you learned, instead of this idea where this is how we teach every kid. This is how every kid is supposed to learn. And how are you going to be successful with a curriculum that's not modified for the way that you learn? Probably not. That probably wouldn't have worked so much for you. So it sounds like the teachers were on board and your parents kind of pushed that as well. And then you said, to prove them wrong. So when you hear this story, what was that like for you to hear the story of, you're not going to graduate?
So when I first heard that, initially there was some relief, because I had a parapro with me from kindergarten till 5th grade. And then I was in a resource classroom from middle school until I graduated from high school. When I was in middle school though, and when I was in Susie Hall, shout out to Mrs. Hall, my resource room teacher, I was in a resource classroom with kids with different learning disabilities. I had students in there that were on the autism spectrum. I had students who were special needs. I had students in my classroom who had ADD, ADHD, reading comprehension. So we all had different disabilities. So I kind of knew right there and then, okay, everybody in this room has a learning disability. That must mean I have one. I didn't know what it was though. And then when my parents told me about my diagnosis just before my freshman year of high school, I was like, okay, well, part of me is relieved because now I understand, okay, this is why I said this and nobody understood it. This is why I did this and nobody really quite understood why I did it. So it finally made sense. But then for me to hear that there's a group of professionals and doctors who don't think you can do specific things or certain things because you have autism, I'm not going to lie, that really ticked me off because I remember at the time that I was in our family den and I called it the cave because, that was kind of like my place to go and hibernate, if you will. Like I would come home from high school or practice and I'd go right to that den, shut the door and just be by myself. That's where I ate my dinner and like whatnot. So anyway, I was watching the Tigers at the time, because I'm a big Detroit sports fan. But then when I went back to the den after my parents had this talk with me, I immediately shut the TV off at 30 seconds. I remember just leaning forward in the recliner and I just said to myself, all right, you know what you have. It all makes sense now. But now you have a group of people who think that you can't do certain things in your life because of an autism diagnosis. You have bullies who disrespect you. You have people who doubt you for your abilities on the basketball court. And that's when I said to myself, you know what? Let's go shut some people up. Let's go prove to a lot of these people that I can go do certain things despite having an autism diagnosis. I'm going to go out and prove all these people wrong that, just because I have autism, it doesn't define who I am, because I'm going to go out and define who I am. Anthony Ianni is going to define who he is, not a diagnosis. And so at the same time, I was ticked off, but at the same time, it's like, okay, mom and dad wanted me to tell me at the right time. They did. It lit a fire in me, and I just went after that. So every opportunities that were presented to me or given to me or offered to me, like I ran with those opportunities. Anytime I got the chance to go into the gym and work out with other different coaches in the area, like I always took advantage of that because I wanted to be the best player that I could be. I wanted to be the best student that I can be at school, the best person I can be. So at first it was a little shocking, but then I was like, all right, well, this is what you have now. This is your motivation. So you might want to take full advantage of it.
Yeah, and what I hear from you is, yes, I am autistic, but that doesn't mean they can't. Like when you mention, I'm not going to have somebody tell me I can't do something. And right. I think that's really powerful because I do think a lot of kids that I see initially feel like that. Like I've been told I just can't do that, so I'm not going to try. And that right. puts them in a really tough spot. Because especially if something is going to be a little bit harder, then that is really putting them in a place where they instantly think that this isn't doable for them, or, why bother even asking? And I think that's a really sad thing. And then we all really have to step back and be careful about our language that we use to anyone, right? Like, why should we put a limit on someone? You're like, well, if this is what you want to do, we're going to help you figure it out. Right. And what does that look like? It might not look like another peer, their age, maybe it looks a little different, but, it is doable. Mm-hmm. We just have to figure out how, right?
Correct. And I think the other thing is too, is you kind of talked about in the beginning, how there are professionals out there who say those things and then the parents kind of just accept that fate. And but because I know, Holly, there may be some folks that listen to this podcast or watch the podcast and go, well, my son or daughter is not going to be like Anthony Ianni one day. And I've always told those same folks who approach me with that, I say, well, first of all, I don't want your son or daughter to be like me. I want your son or daughter to be better than me in areas that I'll never succeed in. So I always use this example perfectly. There's a lot of individuals on the spectrum, as you may know, who are fantastic at math, who are just math wizards. Me, on the other hand, I am the worst math wizard you will ever meet. I'm terrible at it. I'm horrible at math because my biggest strengths in certain areas for school subjects were history, geography. Because if you gave me a map of the United States, I'm gonna show you every single state on there, without the state lines on there. You give me dates and numbers and times and years, yeah, that's my biggest strength. But if you give me a squared plus b squared equals c squared, yeah, I'm not gonna figure that out. Like, I'm not gonna be able to do that. So that's why I've always told parents, like, your son or daughter is going to excel in areas that I will never excel in. But I've also told those same parents that, keep your expectations high, try to let your kids fly, like push them up, because, they may not make it, but they're going to make a heck of a lot farther than you or other people think they can go in life. And that's why I've always told parents and teachers, especially, keep the expectations high. It doesn't matter if it's a student who's a straight A student. It doesn't matter if it's a student who's like me, who's a very slow learner, has to process things differently than others. You keep the expectations high. And I think that's why I was at a time in Okemos, in Okemos schools, where I had teachers who had those same mindsets, who had those expectations, the high expectations for everybody, no matter where they were at on that grade chart, if you will. And they kept them high because they wanted their students to learn and be the best they could be. And I think the more positivity we send students, like my teacher sent with me and the rest of my classmates, it helps others. Because if you are teaching a kid who doubts himself and you don't give them that positivity they need, just like an individual on the autism spectrum, if you tell that individual you're not going to do certain things in life because you have autism, they will go in the tank and they will have that mindset of, yep, you're right. I can't do this. And so that's why I've always told students too, Holly, like, hey, autism made me who I am, and I'm proud of that, because without autism, I'm not, you and I aren't sitting here having this conversation right now. Like, I'm doing God knows what right now. But I've also told those kids, like, hey, autism is the main reason why I got to where I am today in my life. And it'll be the same reason why you go to wherever you want to go in your life. So don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something. It's your job to look at those individuals in the eyes and go, you know what? You don't think I can do it, but sit back and watch me, because you're going to witness history.
I think that is really encouraging. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because there may be some parents and some professionals listening or watching today thinking that that's not possible for my child or the child that I support. And I do want to, and I'm glad that you addressed that, because I think that's a valid point.
Yep.
And there are children with all kinds of skills, right?
Yep.
All kinds of skill differences. And we're not saying that, this expectation is somehow going to harm that child. I think it's the way you present information as well. Like, if you say, if you don't go to college, then you're a failure, that's
Right.
not setting an expectation.
Right.
It's, hey, you find an interest in college, let's figure out how to make this work for you, and supporting them in the way that they need. I'm not sure if my kids will go to college. That's up to them. If that's important to them, then we're going to figure out what that might look like. And it may not look like what it looks like for other kids, but we're going to figure it out.
Right.
So, just looking at that, and again, this child can't communicate. Oh, they can. You just haven't worked with the right professional and haven't gone forward in this direction yet. It's not possible. Right. So I think when that pops up in our heads, which it can, we're all human, right? It is possible.
Yep.
I think of it kind of like a ladder, where if we have this championship, like I'm not sporty here. Okay. So bear with me. You're the sports guy, not me. So maybe at the top is the championship. And I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not sure what it looks like, because it's going to be individualized to any child.
Right.
But where you are now, and then those steps and what it looks like, and those steps are going to look different for every single kid. So when I think about that, it's like, what does this look like for this child? Okay, maybe this child really wants to tell you that they want, this food or this, what, let's do that. We're going to figure it out together.
Yep.
So that every child may look different, but there is no can't. It's
No.
just figuring it out. So I think that's a really good kind of conversation to have when those stories pop up in our heads. Again, we're human, we're going to have them.
Right.
You know, I don't know anybody that doesn't have doubts sometimes, right?
And I met quite a few of those people. And I'll bring up another good example for you real quick. So my sister has 3 kids, all girls, and 2 of those 3 are twins. And my twin nieces were diagnosed with on the spectrum at a year and a half, when they were a year and a half years old. And as their uncle, you know, it kind of hit home for me, because it's like, man, like, but then I got right to work. I started calling people that I knew who work in the field and started pointing my sister in different directions. Hey, go here, try there, try there. And so they started taking ABA therapy and treatments at Michigan State University, where I graduated. And long story short, the reason why my nieces were diagnosed at such an early age was because they were nonverbal. They were not interacting with people. They were not communicating much. And they were in their own little world. Fast forward, they're both 4 years old. One of them wants to talk up a storm nonstop and is interacting with people left and right. And then the other one, still very nonverbal, but she is communicating in ways like you talked about, like whether it's a communication board, whether it's using 1 word or 2 words. I mean, she said she called my sister mom for the first time 2 months ago.
Oh my goodness, that's so exciting.
Yeah. So when I see something like that, I'm like, don't sit there and tell me that, number one, these ABA treatments and therapies aren't working, because they are. But number 2, don't ever sit there and tell me that, you know, my niece, who's right now, I would say maybe in the middle of the spectrum, like, don't sit there and tell me that the expectations for her aren't high, because they are. Because where she has gone from a year and a half to now, like a year and a half years old to 4 years old, is incredible. And she's going to continue to make strides. But it's like you said, it's about that ladder. It's about climbing up that ladder, how many steps you can make, what's the next step you could take, and how far you can go. Because like I mentioned earlier, you know, a lot of kids in the world today may not make it as high as they can go, but they're going to make it a heck of a lot farther, a heck of a lot higher than a lot of people originally think they could go.
Right. Right. And again, I am getting all the chills being a mom. I'm like, oh, you know, and hearing mom for the first time, what a beautiful thing. Or whatever that is, whether it's using words or communicating in a different way, that's really cool. So it sounds to me like you're saying expectations in the way that works for that child, families, supports, family systems, school systems coming together and figuring out how to support that child in the way that they need. And again, we're not waiting once a year for our meeting.
Right.
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 I'll give you an example. On Sunday, today is Tuesday morning. On Sunday, I had emailed my oldest son's principal and his supports at school, and we're meeting Friday. So today's Tuesday, we'll meet Friday at 12. So I want to encourage, anytime there is something that comes up where everyone needs to get together, don't hesitate.
Yeah.
You know, let's come together as the family in the school.
Yep.
So in your story, you mentioned a few moments ago about bullying. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's part of your mission because of your experience.
Yeah. So, and it is. And, you know, throughout my younger days, I was bullied a lot severely because of being on the autism spectrum, because there were some things, again, that I said and did different than others that not a lot of people understood. And they took advantage of all that. They really took advantage of me. And then when I got to middle school, a lot of the bullying and teasing was because of my height. Like at 11 years old, going into 6th grade, I was 6 feet tall, wearing a size 13 shoe.
My goodness.
Yeah. So you don't see an 11-year-old who's 6 feet tall walking around town, especially my hometown these days. But so I really dealt with a lot of bullying because of that. And people can just kind of see that it really got to me, because as a younger kid, like being on the autism spectrum, like I took things very seriously, very literally. And that's one of the things I have being on the autism spectrum, is that I'm very black and white. So if you say something to me, I could take it the complete opposite. And I didn't understand nouns, verbs, idioms, sarcasms, or jokes at all really well. I still don't to this day, especially the jokes and sarcasm piece, but I'm better, than what I was 10, 15 years ago. I mean, I'm probably the one throwing sarcastic comments at people these days because I was around so many teammates and friends who were sarcastic with me. So I kind of had to get along with the program. But just everything I dealt with. And, there was a time when, with obviously as a middle schooler, that's a time period where you're trying to find your way, trying to figure out, what group of people you're going to fit in with, where do you belong? And I was kind of in that category, but like, I wanted to be, I don't want to say the class clown, but I want to be the funny guy in my grade class. And I would do all these different jokes and all these different sayings. And, a lot of people were laughing at it. And in my mind, I was thinking at the time, okay, people are laughing with me. But it actually took me almost 15 years to realize that, okay, they weren't laughing with you. They were laughing at you. And but again, I couldn't tell that at the time. So, and I had teammates. So before the basketball days, I was doing baseball in elementary school. I did football and basketball in middle school and high school. I stopped playing football after my freshman year. But the severe bullying and teasing I dealt with football teammates in middle school got to the point where I wanted to make myself sick or like make myself gag before practice so I wouldn't go to practice because I didn't want to deal with that on a daily basis. Like it was so tough for me. But then I didn't tell my parents about it. I didn't tell my dad about it because I didn't know what he was going to say. Because my dad's one of those individuals who's very tough-minded, but at the same time, he's always told me, block out the noise, focus on what's in front of you in your life, and take things one step at a time. That's what he's always taught me. And the harder you work, the more you earn too. But when I told him about it, he just looked at me and said, well, he said, number one, you don't let anybody do that to you. He said, number two, he's like, we never encourage anybody to use violence. That's not how our family rolls. But you play a sport to your advantage. You play sports for your advantage. I was like, what are you talking about? He said, what's the one thing you do in football? You hit people, you tackle people. He's like, here's what I want you to do. Whenever you guys have a hitting drill tomorrow, a tackling drill, you find your bully, you line up across from him, and you do it in a way that's respectful in the sport. That's what you do. He's like, you want to earn somebody's respect, that's what you got to do. So I remember we were in a tackling drill where you would just hold the ball, person runs at you, you got to tackle the person with the ball. So it's work on form tackling, protect yourself, make sure you keep your head up and everything. So I saw my bully out in this drill and he lined up across from me. I lined up across from him. He came running at me with the ball. I went after him and I laid a good pop on his shoulder pads and took him down. And everybody on the team was just like, it's like, yeah, like, and after that, Holly, like you didn't hear too much from anybody after that.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was the same with basketball too. Like if anybody ever doubted me on the court, if anybody ever talked trash to me from the stands, I would listen to that. But I went ahead and let my game do the talking. Thus my dad saying to me, you let the sport do the talking for you. You do it in a way where you're not using your hands, your feet, you're letting your talent do all that talking for you. So if somebody was trash talking me from the stands, saying I was not a good free throw shooter, I went out and I make, I go 5 for 5 in a game and I find that person and be like, okay, I just won 100% from the line today. What are we talking about? Or you can't do 15 points or 12 rebounds. Well, I would come out with 20 points and 17 rebounds. It's like, all right, like don't, again, back to the whole stop doubting me stuff, because I had that chip on my shoulder, but, just going through those days, Holly, of the bullying and the teasing, like, it's, in the beginning, when I started my speaking career, when I started my career as a bullying advocate, along as a self-advocate for autism, it was very difficult for me to share those stories because they are personal stories to me that I don't tell a lot of people. But then after I spoke in my first ever middle school, almost over 9 years ago, when I got a phone call the next day from a mom telling me that her son who has autism, her son's bully apologized to him after the assembly, and 5 years of pain, bullying, and tormenting an individual because they were on the autism spectrum. When I hear that, I immediately said to myself, keep doing what you're doing, because it shows these kids that you've been in their shoes before. You know what it's like, because they don't have that experience, because some of their teachers may have dealt with those same issues as kids, as young students, but they don't share that with students. But you share your experiences and you show these kids that, you know what, they're not alone. Because whenever some of these young students hear my stories about how I was bullied, their initial reaction was, wait, whoa, like you played basketball for one of the best basketball programs in the country. You played basketball for Michigan State University in Tom Izzo, like, and you were bullied as a kid, like seriously? And my response always is like, yeah, like I was in your shoes before. I know what it's like. And so obviously the pain, and I don't want to say suffering. I don't want to go that far, but just the pain and the tormenting I dealt with for so many years, like from kindergarten up until my freshman year of high school. Like that's 8 years of dealing with bullying and tormenting from other people. And so all my pain and tormenting that I went through, it's benefited me and it's helping benefit others, because my experiences and sharing it with other kids, it's going to help them not only get through those tough days, but it's also going to help them, motivate them, if you will, to go out and not only be the change they wish to see in life, but to go out and make that change they want to see in life as well.
And it sounds like it benefits, and thank you for sharing your story. I know that that is not easy, especially when, it was incredibly painful, and then saying, here is this incredibly painful story to a bunch of people, right? So not only is that supporting autistic kids saying, I hear you, this was hard, and I've been there. And like you said, there's something very powerful that you're not alone. And also on the other side of that, you mentioned educating neurotypical kids. And I think that's something we have to really think about. Dr. Tara Regan and I had done an episode together where we talked about the importance of educating neurotypical kids. And we have this like, oh, we've got to teach, autistic children how to get along with everyone else. Well, what happens on the other part of that? Like, okay, this is to me almost more important to educate neurotypical people, because there's a lot more of them. Right. Exactly. So it's like, okay, so now this person who heard you, obviously you've changed their life as well, that they're going to go apologize to this other student for being so cruel to them. And again, I think your work is so wonderful in so many ways. And again, especially teaching neurotypical kids, look, this is damaging. Like what you're doing. I mean, this is a person that you're treating so poorly. And there's a lot to be said about that part.
There is. And you talk about that. And you also forget sometimes too, that one of the many reasons why schools bring me in is because they talk about unity in their school. Because I may go to some schools who were so tight knit like 10, 15 years ago, but they kind of lost that way recently. And, maybe the pandemic had a lot to do with it, but even before the pandemic, like I had schools say to me, like, we've kind of lost our way, getting away from that family message, being a family, being an incredible tight knit community and culture here at our school. And that's one of the last messages I leave with those schools is that, I talk about their school mascot, whether it's the Bulldogs or the Chargers or the Vikings, just to name a few. And I always tell those kids, like, you are part of something special here. Like, you are part of this family for life. You get to bleed the school colors forever. And I always tell them, like, I'll never be a part of your families because I got my own families I'm a part of. I am an Okemos chieftain. I get to bleed maroon and white every day. I'm a Michigan State Spartan for life. Like, I get to bleed green and white. And a lot of those messages is what the administrators want, because they want their kids to realize that you are part of the same group, you're on the same team, and we're all part of the same family. So why would you want to go ahead and bully, tease, even disrespect somebody in your own family? And so, when we talk about unity, it's also a big reason why schools want to try to bring me in, because they want that message of unity. They want that message of change. But I tell those students, like, I'm not going to come in here and be the change. Because I tell students all the time, like, I'm there for 2 hours, 3 hours tops, but then I'm gone. And some of them may never see me ever again. They may follow me on my social media accounts, Instagram and Twitter. Great, cool. But like face to face, they may never see me again. And then I say, it's not the teacher's responsibility to make those changes, because they're not in the hallways every day, interacting with your classmates. They got to prepare for their lessons. They got to prepare for their next classes. So, but I tell those students, the change has to start with you, not me, you, because you're the ones who change somebody's day from bad to great. You're the ones that change somebody's life from terrible to incredible. And you will be the number one reason why you may save somebody's life. And I always preach hard to students about how I read, hear stories about kids and younger kids taking their own lives because of bullies and their acts. And I've always guaranteed those students, I guarantee it, there's at least one of you in that room or in the room with me who are sick and tired of hearing those exact same stories. And the amount of facial expressions I get and the amount of head nodding I get from a lot of students, it's like, yeah, you're tired of it. I'm tired of it. So go be that change. Go out and be the change that you want to see in life. And some of those have resulted in anti-bullying clubs in schools. Some of it has resulted in anti-bullying, guidance and rules in schools. Like, so there are a lot of kids who, like me, are sick and tired of seeing people being treated with disrespect and being bullied all the time because they're quote unquote different. So it's a job that I love. It's something that I have a great passion for, and I'm going to continue to do it for as long as I need to.
I love that. And I like the way that you brought up that too, because that is significant. I mean, I see that children on the spectrum or children who have any kind of differences in regarding bullying, they don't want to deal with it anymore. And so they're seriously thinking about taking their own lives, and some of them do. And what happens if you hear somebody say, what you're saying, and I'm trying not to get too emotional here, is when you are bullying somebody, you are breaking them down. You are breaking them. And a lot of kids, like you said, they don't feel comfortable sharing, what's happening for them. It is just their personal torture, every single day. And it's a really tough thing. So I love your work. And again, thank you so much for what you do, and what you're doing and sharing your story is changing lives.
I mean, that's the goal, Holly, because, when I first started off, I didn't know what my goal was as a speaker, because I had honestly had no idea how much of an impact that my words and my story and message and, work would bring to people. I honestly had no idea when I first started out. But then when I kept getting all these different messages and phone calls from whether it's parents or teachers or students tell me about their stories and tell me about how their bullies came up to them afterwards and said, I apologize if I put you through all these things. Like, and I had students coming up to me after presentations, legit crying. And, I had a goal. The goal became at first, like, if you're not making one person cry, then you're not doing your job. But then I changed it from that to, as long as you inspire one person everywhere you go, and not just as an anti-bullying advocate, but as a self-advocate, whenever I go to autism conferences, events, when I speak to sports teams on leadership, and when I do my anti-bullying presentations, like, the goal, like, that was set 8 years ago, and that will always be the goal for me, is to make an impact, leave an impact, even if it's just on one person, because that's all it takes in life. As long as I know that I inspired one person at every school, conference, event, or sports team that I taught to, then my job is done, because I know that that person who was inspired by what I had to say, he or she's going to try and go out and make the change that they wish to see in life. They are going to push harder than ever to try to make sure that everything that happened to them in their life doesn't happen to another person ever again. And so it's make an impact, leave an impact, even if it's just not one person in life, because that's all it takes.
I love that. That is so true. So I am hopeful that at least one person watching and listening to us today, their life will be changed and they can go out and support others. So that's fantastic. I know you do speaking. You've got a lot going on. So how can our watchers and listeners find out more about you?
So they can go to my website, which is anthonyianni.com, and on there they'll find everything about me that they want to know. And then they can also find information about my newly released book that came out in September called Centered: Autism, Basketball, One Athlete's Dream. It's my memoir about my entire life story. And real quickly, Holly, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but one of the things my co-author and I did for the book was we put some of my IEP evaluations in my book. And that was a very tough decision for me to make, because, again, as you know, as a parent, there is a lot of things in those IEP evaluations that are very personal. But my mom, God bless her, she still has this big old box of stacks of paperwork from all those IEP meetings from kindergarten until I graduated high school. And my co-author thought it would be very powerful and inspirational to have those in there to show these families and educators about how far I've come just as a person. And again, it was not an easy decision for me to make, but he told me, don't do what's best for you, the author, do what's best for you, the reader. And my co-author told me to sleep on the decision, but I didn't sleep because I called him back like 20 minutes after we initially talked. I was like, okay, let's do it. So, but yeah, AnthonyIanni.com and Centered Autism Basketball One Athlete's Dream. And then anybody who listens to this, if you buy the book, if you read it, I promise you won't be disappointed. Again, Holly, like the conversations we had today, like the first 9 to 10 chapters are going to be very, very hard for people to read because again, there are more stories about my bullying, dealing with bullying as a kid. There are a lot of, details in there that people are going to read and go legit make people want to cry. But then like the rest of the book after that, it's going to make you want to get up out of your seat and really cheer hard for the underdog.
Well, I know what I'm doing when we get off here, and that is getting your book for my 17-year-old. We're going to read it together. So that is really exciting. And I'll make sure that, all of your links are in the show notes for everybody to go and check it out.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for coming on. And I hope you come back on and chat with me again sometime.
I would love to. And thank you so much, Holly, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to click that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like this episode, please share it with someone. It may just be what they need to watch today. If you're a parent, I'd love if you came on over and joined our Facebook group, Autism ADHD Group for Parents. If you're a therapist or educator, come on over to our group, Autism ADHD Group for Therapists and Educators. You're going to find those links right down there in the notes. Thanks so much, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
All content provided is protected under applicable copyright, patent, trademark, and other proprietary rights. All content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. No content is intended to be a substitute for professional medical or psychological diagnosis, advice, or treatment. Information provided does not create an agreement for service between Holly Blanc Moses Crossvine Clinical Group, the interviewee, Holly Blanc Moses LLC, and the recipient. Consult your physician regarding the applicability of any opinions or recommendations with respect to your symptoms or medical condition or the symptoms or medical condition of your family member. Children or adults who show signs of dangerous behavior toward themselves and/or others should be placed immediately under the care of a qualified professional.